Hello, and welcome to Everyday Creation, a show about living our purpose, lifting our vibes, and expressing our creativity for the highest good. I'm Kate Jones, here with Marla Grant, Advanced Grief Recovery Specialist, Certified Positive Intelligence Coach, and founding affiliate leader of Helping Parents Heal Tampa. Marla, welcome to Everyday Creation.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate.
You describe yourself as a guide to help people go, quote, from heartache to healing. That is quite beautiful. Obviously, you're doing important work. What led you to where you are now?
Well, it's been quite the ride, actually, and certainly not one that I ever expected. And it took
Or
me a while.
wanted?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
I mean, in some way,
yeah. Of course, in the world of form, none of us would ever say we had chosen all these things to happen to us, but there is the thought on a higher level that yes, we absolutely had some had a hand in planning what was going to be the trajectory of our lives. So of course, we forget all that when we come here because we can't experience things the way we need to experience them if we remember that this is all a game. Uh, it's all a play. I should start by telling you that's one of my most important concepts is I really believe in what William Shakespeare referred to that, all the world's a stage and we all have our entrances and our exits. And if we can remember that, it helps us realize that everyone has a part to play and that everyone in my life has played this part in whatever capacity they were meant to.
I believe that too. And yet we get so caught up in the
Drama.
physicality here
Yeah.
that that it's just like, "Oh, I'm devastated," or "I'm this or that," and it's a good reminder to come back to who you really are.
Yeah. And, before I get into how I got here, I want to also say that I tell people that my work is really at the intersection of the world of spirit and the world of form, because especially with the parents I work with, helping parents heal has a very metaphysical orientation. So we talk a lot about signs from our kids, the different way that we now connect with them, in the energetic vibration that they're living in now, just in their light being selves. Um, and so having a reading or doing anything esoteric like that can be very uplifting, or even whatever you do in your own spiritual or religious practice, that can be very uplifting. However, you have a great reading, you have a great spiritual session of some kind, and guess what? The next day, you're right back here in the world of form, living what we're supposed to be living right now. And that's a whole other set of things you need to learn in order to cope. And so that's where my work is. I absolutely honor the spiritual and I do go there once in a while with my clients. More than once in a while probably, but there are specific things I do when I teach grief recovery that are very grounded in this world. So to answer your question, my first child that I had, I got really, really sick, and I was unconscious for 2 days. Where I was given last rites, and I woke up. I had an emergency C-section. I woke up and was told I had a little baby who was 5 weeks premature. He is still with me. He's my oldest son, living in Atlanta, and we're very, very close. And then the following year, I had an infant son, and I was going to just do a trial labor because, it was thought that we didn't necessarily have to have another C-section, but things went disastrously wrong. And he was deprived of oxygen during the birth, and he died during the delivery. So, you know, that was my first loss of a child, and it was just the most devastating, empty, barren feeling. And a lot of people think mistakenly that because you haven't known that child in this life for a long time, that somehow it's less of a miscarriage or a stillbirth or even a neonatal birth are less than the death of a child you've known for many years. And it's just absolutely not true. It's just a different kind of loss, but it was extremely deep in its own way.
Some months, didn't it, to really
Well, and which leads me to my next one, and I can kind of answer that question. I got pregnant just 12 weeks later. And that baby we also named, Shane was his name of the baby that we lost, and then we named the new baby Shane, and we were uncommonly emotionally bonded, and I was sure, I've always been certain that it was the soul of the same child that just definitely needed me to be his mom and in our family, and that actually was confirmed to me many, many years later by a highly regarded evidential medium who was trying to she read my other 2 kids, and then she said, "Is there a twin?" And I thought she was referring to something else in my family, 2 similar names, and she said, "No, that's not it." And then I hadn't told her about the baby, and then I told her, and she said, "That's why I can't read him over there because he's already back here." And I'm like, "I knew that." So, yeah, that was really interesting. And then I had my daughter. A few years later, I had my only daughter, and when she was 7, she was diagnosed with leukemia. Shane was her donor. She had a bone marrow transplant, and she did really, really well for about 6 years, and then she, unfortunately relapsed, and she passed away just before her 14th just after her 14th birthday. And I had had another son just after about 16 months after she was born, and they were really, really close, just like little twins, and she was like a little mother to him, and, his name was Ryan, and Ryan, you know, was, of course, really devastated when she passed. He was about 12, and then when Ryan was 31, he took his life. And I don't believe that it was I believe that the death of his sister might have been a contributing factor, but I think there were other things going on as well. It wasn't drug related or anything, but I had always had the feeling that he somehow was not like almost like he'd come here too early. I mean, he just wasn't ready. It was like he had one foot in this world and one foot in the other world all the time. So just all three of them really, really different types of losses, and I experienced them all very differently. But by the time of course, certainly by the time Nicole died as my second, I was beginning to wonder, I'm like, this is really unusual. This is a lot. But for sure, by the time Ryan died, I was like, okay, and all along the way, of course, I'd been doing a lot of spiritual searching. I was raised Catholic, but over time, when I left home, I was rejecting that theology more and more, and just doing my own learning about other religions and spirituality in general. And I just began to realize that I was really meant to do something with this. I mean, there was a reason all this happened. And kind of funny, not too long ago, I was in meditation, and I now have this very clear idea of the things I want to share, but some of them are going to feel very out there to a lot of people. And so I began to question, like, I even had a coaching session with a friend of mine, and the title of the coaching session was, "Do I need to be less of me?" And we had a
ever
great coaching session. And then I had a meditation, and I was thinking about, all of this topic. And I asked that question. And then I typically will write in my journal after that. And immediately the first thing that came to me was like almost shouting at me, "How many more children do you have to lose before you get it?" And I was like, "Okay,
Whoa.
okay." I know. I like, "How many more before you know this is what you're supposed to do?" So I was like, "Okay, okay, I get it, I get it."
I suppose so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was really, really clear. I mean, I have been for the last, since probably 2016. Um, I've really been on that trajectory. But this is why I talk to you about public speaking and why that feels more and more important to me. And I've been writing more. And so yeah, it's maybe when not maybe, I'm sure it's why would you not take these experience that you have? And this applies to all of us and help other people with it.
Absolutely. And we do. We have our life purpose, and you know it when you are doing it.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Now, I want to just comment on the reference you made to me saying that I'm a guide. I'm also very clear, and I tell my clients this, that everyone has the answers inside them. They have their own personal guidance. And I can't heal anyone. I can't do the work for them, but I can show them the stepping stones to getting to where they need to be. But they have to do the work. They
absolutely.
absolutely have to, and they have to trust themselves. We have this innate knowing, and we just have to learn how to tap into that.
Well, that's how I read it when, it's in your email signature. But that's how I read it, that you're a guide to helping them heal themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people don't realize that there are specific steps that you can take, for instance, in healing from a grief event. And it's not helpful to just keep talking and talking and talking about the loss, because all that does is it keeps you stuck in the story of what happened. And we don't want to stay stuck in that story. We want to be able to reflect on it, work through the things we need to work through. And that's all about the things that you wish had been different, better, or more in the relationship, because those are the things that are left with us that we grieve. I wish I had done this differently. If only I had maybe treated this person differently or done this when I said I was going to do that. I could have been maybe a better parent, a better sibling, a better friend, whatever the circumstance. Um, and then of course we project into the future. And I tell people, and this is one of those things I was talking about that people don't want to hear. That's stuff we make up. All that stuff for the future, we make that stuff up. We just we fabricate all these dreams of what's going to be. So just let that go. That was stuff you made up anyway. I'll never get to walk my child down the aisle. I'll never get to see them graduate. I'll never get to see them build this amazing company. I'll never have their grandchildren. Well, that's just stuff you made up. If I could get rid of one word in the language, it would be should. This shouldn't have happened. They should still, no, no, whatever has happened is what was meant to happen. And the question is always, we need to let go of that question. Why? Why did this happen? We're never going to know the answer to that. And even if we got some hypothetical why, it would just lead to another. Well, why that? So, acceptance is like the key to everything. That was another thing I did in one of my meditation sessions many years ago before I started this work. I was asking my guides, what do I need to do to be as helpful as possible to my clients? And immediately I hear, you need to get really clear about what helped you heal. And so 3 words immediately I wrote down: personal responsibility, acceptance, and willingness. And I was like, oh, those spelled paw. So I made a little graphic that says paw, because people remember visuals. And the personal responsibility piece is all about, we have to begin by taking at least 1% responsibility for our healing. No one can do that for us. We need to take the steps, but we need to just know that no one can heal us, that personal responsibility piece is also about taking responsibility for reviewing your past relationships, whatever you have lost, and looking at it honestly. And that's part of the grief recovery method. Is extremely helpful. And the second thing is acceptance. And I alluded to that. And I feel like that's the most important of the three, acceptance. Because when you begin to accept what has happened instead of insisting on knowing why, then you can move into a place of asking what am I meant to do with this? I mean, I could ask forever, well, why did I lose three children? I actually never I mean, I probably did wonder why is all this happening, but I never thought, why me? I'm like, I more often thought, well, why not me? Because I could look around and see all kinds of things. I'm not the only one that is experiencing loss, and some much worse than what I would consider mine is. So that acceptance piece is so important. The question instead of why needs to be what? What am I meant to do with this? How could I use this? Am I meant to use it to help someone else? Is it taking me to a higher level of knowing or learning in my own life? And the third thing, the W, is willingness. You have to be willing to let go of that story that you're telling yourself about that loss. And excuse me for looking on my phone, but I have this wonderful quote on my website that I love so much. And I read it to everyone. I believe she is a poet or an author. Her name is Vienna Ferron, and she says, "Who are you if your story begins to change? Do not be so loyal to your suffering that your healing doesn't stand a chance."
Yes, that's
That
wonderful.
that is willing, right? Isn't it beautiful? It's willingness in a nutshell. And I find this is especially true with child loss. I've seen many, many parents who have done a phenomenal job of working through their grief, coming to an understanding, learning how to incorporate that loss into their life and relating to their child in a different way. But there are also some parents who engage in what I call the mystique of child loss. And that is this idea that our loss is worse than anyone else's and that we are somehow, on the pinnacle of the grief world. And it becomes kind of a badge of notoriety of some kind. Like, well, I have the worst grief. And, there are people who will say, your life is ruined. You'll be devastated for life. You can never get over this. And one of the most damaging, it sounds like a very high minded quote, but I think it's so damaging, is this idea that the depth of your grief is equated to the depth of your love. And I know what this does to parents because I've talked to them. They are afraid to move beyond and to begin to re engage life and to feel any kind of joy or happiness because they feel, not only do they feel that they're dishonoring the memory of their child, but they're also concerned about what other people think. I've been reading the works of Nancy Dennison, who had a very deep near death experience. And I was already very familiar with a lot of what she's written, but I've learned some things in greater depth than I knew before. And I mean, if you think about this life, you can kind of equate it to what happens when we dream. We manifest these lives and these things in our dream world. And they feel, when we're in that dream, they feel extremely real. And, we would swear all that is going on, even though sometimes I don't know about you, but sometimes in my dreams, the things that happen are against the laws of physics. But when those dreams are done, you don't agonize about, you just let them go and they're done. And that's pretty much the same thing that happens when our kids pass. Mm. I mean, so let me differentiate. There's these human bodies, and remind me to talk to you about that with my daughter because that's really important. And then there's the light being part of us. These bodies are just like, even science classifies them as mammals, where they're just human animals. And so that part is what passes away. But the light being part of ourselves, that lives on forever because energy doesn't just go away. And I had a really, really deep lesson about this when my daughter passed because we had an open casket when she passed. And at the funeral home, I hadn't seen her since we left her at the hospital. And my oldest son was with me and he said, "Do you want to go up and see her?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I just don't know if I can do it." And he said, "Come on, Mom." And that was such a gift that he took me up there because I looked in that casket and that body, that container was just that. It was so evident to me that I remember catching my breath and saying, "Oh my God, that's not Nicole." And I think that probably happened with her because the contrast between who she was when she was living, vibrant, happy, joyful, loving, just made everyone around her feel good. She was just that kind of person. And when she died, I knew she was fine. I mean, I just knew she was fine. I did not worry about her at all. But the contrast between that, knowing her and seeing that, I'm telling you, if you ever see that, it it will bring you a lot of comfort if you understand that these this interaction is happening between our spirit selves and not our bodies,
Right.
and that continues on forever. So I tell our parents, if I had died and I was watching my child back here, would I want them to be miserable? No, absolutely not. Please
Right.
go live your life. I'm still around. I'm still around. So yeah, all those concepts I think can be, can be very comforting.
Yes. I and you can talk about this or not talk about it, but you did have an encounter with your daughter after she passed.
I've told several people about that, but I've had some amazing, amazing things happen to me. But the one that you're referring to, is it the rocking chair one?
Yes, I think so.
After she passed, it was that night or one or two nights afterwards. It was like a dream, but what many of us refer to these as kind of visitation dreams. It's the difference between the kind of random dream you have that you're, you know, out flying around or whatever you're doing or interacting with people, and the kind where you have a dream and it's so real, you were right there. So this is that to some degree. So I was taken by what I would consider one of my spirit guides, my helpers, through what looked like it wasn't a light tunnel. It was literally it looked like a tunnel under the ground. We went down there and I could tell that people were in various stages of dying. When we pass over, it takes us a while to mentally come out of the human frame of mind. That's what state these people were in. Nicole was already pretty past that. So we went into a room and my guide is standing next to her and next to me and she says, "Are you ready? Are you ready to see Nicole?" And I said, "Yes." And so Nicole comes riding into this room on Clifford the big red dog wearing her jam. And
Oh,
of course, all this is like iconic. You see the things that you imagine because you've known them here, you see them in a way that is acceptable to you in your current form. And that would so have been her. Like if she had come in, I don't know, surfing or something, I would have not probably recognized her. But she loved dogs so much. And she was so comfortable. And she came over and I think she was with me for a few minutes. That part of it is a little bit hazy. But she did come over to me and we kind of snuggled a little bit. But she didn't talk to me. She has never talked to me. Um, and then my guide said, "Are you ready to go?" And I said, "Yes." And then I woke up. But this other dream I had was like, it just showed me how thin the veil is. I mean, people who pass over are not in a place. It's all right here. It's just at a different energetic level. So in this dream, and I do know this was a dream because I remember waking up in a flood of tears. I was in a void. It was just a void, and I was in a rocking chair. So there was just darkness all around me in the rocking chair. Nicole sitting on my lap, and she was kind of snuggled into me. And we were just rocking. And she took her hand and she cupped her hand on my face in that little sweet gesture. And the second that she did that, I woke up and I could still feel the warmth of her hand on my cheek. And I'm like, it was like, oh my God, I can feel her. And it was so real, but it was physically tangible.
Which is incredible. That is the story that you
Oh
told
my
me
gosh.
before. I just love that story.
Yeah, it was just amazing. But yeah, my kids have shown up in different random ways. I was sitting in my backyard and I said I hadn't heard from them in a while and could they send me a sign? And their names are Nicole and Ryan. And the next morning, a friend of mine who had been on the East Coast looking at colleges with her daughter and staying in an Airbnb, she had walked out and on the corner of her street. She texted me a photo and she said, "Hey, I just walked out and saw this. I thought you'd like to see this." And mind you, this is the next morning after I've asked Nicole and Ryan for a sign. And the sign said Ryan Nicole Court. Who
Oh my
names a
god.
sign Ryan Nicole Court? I was like, I just died laughing because all I could think of was I wonder how long they argued about whose name was gonna go fir and of course, Ryan would have come first because she was like a little mother to him, she would have let him have his way.
So then, do you share these with your clients?
It depends, it depends. Because when I teach the grief recovery method, there's a specific protocol for that. Although the grief recovery method honors and respects people's spiritual beliefs and that aspect of anything that happens towards healing, it does not teach anything related to that. So I'm very careful about doing that. If I know that they're oriented in that direction, I might say, I'm taking my grief recovery method hat off for a minute because there are other things that I teach. I do teach those kind of concepts. I teach positive intelligence. But when I'm teaching the grief recovery method, I typically stick very, very close to exactly what that curriculum is because it's so powerful
Okay.
and it's so necessary.
So did you to become a specialist in advanced grief recovery,
I
did
did.
you go through training?
Yes, absolutely. I was certified by the Grief Recovery Institute and I had studied counseling in college. But the interesting thing is, you would think otherwise, but therapists and counselors typically in academia, they don't learn about grief. In all the courses I took in college, there was not a specific course on grief.
Wow.
In fact, recently I was looking at some master's programs and I wanted to see if any specific track focused on that. Nothing. All kinds of other maladies, but it's like we don't want to talk about grief. And it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So answer your question, yes, I am certified. I have studied it and practiced it for many years, and it certainly helped me as well. It provided healing in a way for me that I had not experienced before. Some of the concepts I was really familiar with because when I was going through a lot of these losses, I lived overseas and I had to learn and figure things out on my own. So a lot of the concepts were not unfamiliar to me, but the process of, how it's all laid out, that definitely was. And I should also say that the teacher that I had come from her own therapy practice of 20 years and gave it up. And that she's not the only one I've heard this. They bring the grief recovery method into their work, even if they remain therapists or counselors, because it's so powerful. It's been around for 40 plus years, been taught all over the world to hundreds of thousands of people. And it's the only evidence based program in the world. In other words, it's had university level research studies done on it showing its efficacy. I teach an associated class that work I do one-on-one with people because I just find it's more effective. People can develop a really close relationship with me and they feel very confident and open and I can really hear what they're saying, but maybe more importantly, I can hear what they're not saying that they need to say. But I also teach a class called Helping Children with Loss. which is so, so important because it helps adults learn healthy ways to teach their children how to deal with grief. And so many times, if you think about, and this is not an indictment of our parents or, it's no judgment against them or against us, but I know that to some degree I did this with I can use Ryan as an example. We tend to dismiss our child's sadness and anxiety because we can see that it's a small issue. Well, it's small to us, but it's not small to them. And if we're not recognizing what's happening for them and helping them work through it, then this is what happens. They learn not to talk about it. They learn to go away and grieve on their own. And in the absence of healthy information about grief, they make up all kinds of stuff. And if they can't heal in a healthy way, they substitute other things for what healing should give them. And those are things like drugs, social media, alcohol. In adulthood, it can be gambling and sex and promiscuity and any number of things. It can be super excess with exercising. It's a whole bunch of things. Anything,
Eating.
eating
Yes.
or not eating.
Yeah, one or the other.
Exactly. So with Ryan, I saw the importance of this, even though Ryan and I talked about Nicole after she passed, and I would ask him how he was doing. I missed so many signs, or I saw a sign and didn't take it as seriously as I should have. I didn't see it as the warning it should have been. And it wasn't just Nicole's passing, it was difficulties with his dad. I first want to say there are many, many blessings that came from all of my challenges, including my difficult 27-year marriage. My husband had, a lot of emotional problems and a couple of addictions. And, you know, it ran the gamut, even to death threats. And I know that all of that affected not only Ryan, but his two brothers as well, who I'm happy to say are doing really, really well. But I realized that this deeply impacted Ryan. And because I was not at the time familiar enough with, the concepts of grief and how we don't handle it properly, I missed so many signs related to what he was going through. And I believe a lot of that led to his passing. I don't feel responsible for that. Every person who takes their life is responsible for that action. But I do help people deal with, the inevitable guilt, the misplaced guilt, I would say, that they often feel about that.
Right.
So
Do you work in person? How do
I
you?
I typically work remotely via Zoom. I've helped people all over the world, so I have clients from a lot of different places.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And the helping children with loss, I have taught that remotely over Zoom, but I could teach that in person. I just find it's easier on Zoom because no one has to go anywhere and it's surprisingly intimate, as you can tell.
Yes, I think it's terrific. Yes. Do you
Yeah.
still do the pet one too? The grief?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. People are so close to their pets, and
Yeah.
that tends to be many people are so close to their pets, and that tends to be kind of disregarded.
Yes, it does. It does. I tell people, please don't compare losses. You know, it's not the grief Olympics. And when you,
That
I'm
Marla,
sorry,
it's not the grief Olympics. That's an excellent line.
it's not the grief Olympics. We have no right to judge someone else's level of pain. I had a woman call me a few years ago and she was in this area and she said, I know that you work with parents, but I just lost my cat of 18 years and it was her child. It was like her child. And there are people for whom animals are the closest thing to them. I totally empathize with her. I was not going to tell her, well, it's not a child, but there are people who do that. And it's so unkind. So the other thing that's really important to know is that no matter what your loss is, even if you have had a similar loss, it's not helpful to tell someone, I know how you feel. We don't know how anyone feels. It would be more accurate to say, I lost a child or I've experienced child loss. I know what that feels, I know what that felt like for me. But all loss is very unique. The relationships are unique. Even within a family, the dad and the siblings are going to experience things differently than the mother does or the extended family does because the dynamics of the relationship were different. So it's something that we just need to be really aware of and just be very accepting of where people are. And when someone comes to us and wants to talk about their loss or needs to talk about their loss, our job is to just be there and to hold space. And in fact, I typically am almost hesitant to even let people know that I've lost 3 children because if they do know, I immediately say, but look, my loss is not any worse than anyone else's because, immediately they go to that place that most people go, oh my gosh, I don't know how you've managed that, et cetera, et cetera. My loss is no worse than anyone else's. Imagine someone who's lived with the love of their life and had a deeply close relationship for 50 years or so, and then they lost their partner. Why would I ever say my loss is worse than theirs?
Right. And
No,
that's judging too. And
slowly judging.
yeah, and that's not helpful.
No, no. Placing hierarchies on pain is very counterproductive.
Mm. And how do we know anyway?
Yeah, we don't. We just don't know. And that's not the point of helping each other anyway. I always remember that was something Nicole said to me on one of our trips back from one of her treatments, many treatments at the hospital. She said, Mom, just out of the blue, I think the reason that we're here on earth is to help each other.
Oh,
And it just came out of nowhere. And I was like, that's so true. That's all we need to do is help each other. So we need to stay out of judgment. Judgment is so damaging. And we know so little. We have no idea what's going on with other people. So if we could separate out the person from the behaviors, that would go a long way. I mean, we are all from the same stuff. We are all part of source. And all of everything that comes from source is perfection. Only humans judge. Our spirit selves in our native spirit state, we don't judge because we're part of source. And so even source doesn't judge. We can be discerning. We can say there's a difference between discernment and judgment. We can say that behavior is harmful and it's inciting more harmful behavior. That would be discerning. But if we say you are a horrible, awful person and you need to be condemned, that's not our place to do that. I believe that not even God does that because, yeah, I'm not down with this whole hell thing. I mean, what parent condemns their child, especially since it's part of us, We don't condemn our kids when they make mistakes. We're like, that was not a good idea. Maybe you'd like to rethink that. You don't, torture them for eternity. That never made sense to me. So, yeah, we just need to learn to be kinder. And more, I think, especially the world situation right now, nothing changes unless we know it needs to change. So, all of the hatred and vitriol and nastiness that we see right now, that's been there for a long time. It's just decades ago, it was just under the radar. We pretended all this child abuse and all kinds of negative things and misogyny and patriarchy and racism, all those negative things, all under the radar. They weren't very public. And now they are in our face all the time. And we recognize it as something that's not very good. But, what if that were a gift? What if those people who are doing that are instrumental in saying, hey, look at this. You're pretending this wasn't here. And
And
it
then
gives,
it brings it out into the open, and then we can actually deal with it.
yes, yes, we can make other choices. But if we don't acknowledge that it's there and we don't look at it, then that is going to continue and continue to have, an underlying influence on everything. But now we can look at it and make the choice. No, I don't like that. That doesn't feel good. It's not creating the kind of world that I want to share with other people. And that's another thing. When I talk about my work, I never say I'm trying to change the world. That was really, really clear to me in some of my contemplations. My job is to change me. And if I can have a positive impact on anybody, there is this, not just with me, but there's this massive ripple effect. And especially if you're vulnerable, vulnerability is it's the key to trust. It's the currency of trust. If you can be vulnerable and talk about your own failings and your own things that you're going through, or the metamorphosis you've gone through, then people resonate. They want to be at that level of feeling about what's going on with themselves. And it gives them permission to do that.
Sure. And some other people can relate. So that shows us how alike we are versus how separate we are.
Exactly. And I think this is particularly true with people who are very well known and held in high esteem. When they can become vulnerable, people say, oh my gosh, they're going through that. I'm going through that. And it kind of gives them permission to feel the things that they're feeling and to own the thought process that they have and to be who they really are. So, yeah, I think it's very valuable.
So some of what we've been talking about just now, what you have been talking about, it sounds like it's part of the positive intelligence work. Is that right?
Yeah, this whole judgment piece absolutely is. I mean, the positive intelligence work focuses a lot on teaching us about our master judge. I have people, new clients who say to me, well, I don't really judge very much. And I'm like, okay, you back out of your driveway in your car and you start going down the street and somebody is going too slow or they're sitting at the stop sign on their phone. You're not getting lit up about that. Uh, I, we do this, we WTF, we do whatever we do. We judge the people in our lives. We judge circumstances, we judge ourselves, and we judge each other. And in addition to that master judge that is constantly creating you know, this cyclone of dysfunction, the positive intelligence work, it's research based, and they've come up with these 9 primary saboteurs, additional saboteurs, things like the stickler, the controller, the pleaser, the hyperachiever, the victim. They're accomplice saboteurs that the judge pulls in, and we all have them in varying degrees. I, for instance, have a very restless saboteur. And sometimes these accomplice saboteurs tag team with each other. Like your controller and your pleaser will tag team. I can give you a really good example about this because I had my pleaser's not as strong as it used to be. But the pleaser will tell you that you're doing all these good things for other people because you're kind and you want to help them and you're loving. But it's often not being honest. You're often sort of sublimating your own needs, which in turn does not allow you to have an open, completely honest relationship with someone else so that they know what your needs are too, which is really important in a healthy relationship. But the truth is, the way the controller gets in there, the controller is involved in that process too, because the controller says to you, no, I can take care of that thing for that person over there. Because when you do that for that person, he's in a better mood. And then the time you spend together is happier because he's not all stressed out. This is just an example.
So
So,
who's he? Who are you
well,
talking about?
any
Or
hypothetical,
any other
he
person?
or she or my mom,
Okay.
if I do all this stuff for my mom and or my dad and I keep them happy, then
Oh,
they're,
so
then
you're
they're,
control the situation.
yeah, if you control the situation, the pleaser will tell you it's because you're being nice and helpful. But the truth is, you are manipulating things. You are controlling a situation so that you can get something back, which is maybe praise, maybe approval of some kind, maybe a more peaceful environment, whatever it happens to be. That's just an example of how they tag team. So I take the assessment myself every once in a while to see what's changed. And I used to have a very high pleaser saboteur, but that's now dropped down. And instead, the avoider has come up, and the avoider and the restless saboteur are tag teaming together. I have always had a restless saboteur since I was little. And I realized that once I did this work, I used to get up in school and walk around, and I just could never sit still. And that shows up in my adult life as well by being easily distracted. If I have to do something that I'm not familiar with or that doesn't come easily to me, that's why the avoider has jumped in, come up to the top of my top three.
I'm well acquainted with the avoider.
Yes, many people are. I'm avoiding doing some things because maybe I think I'll fail, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's more difficult for me to do it than something I'm familiar with that I can just knock out like that. So that's my current challenge. But we all have them. We all have them. If we're drawing breath, we absolutely have the judge. So there are exercises you can do. And what I love about positive intelligence is that it's grounded in science. And you can go on Google and see any kind of neuroscience information, and it will confirm to you how our body can help us. So in positive intelligence, for instance, we really get focused on touch and things in our body and how things feel, because what happens is it builds a neural pathway to the positive part of your mind, where we call it the sage mind. And in the sage mind, the sage powers are things like the empathize power, explore, navigate, innovate, activate, and they all have special ways that they help you. And that part of your mind is primarily the right side of your brain. That's where clear laser focused thinking happens, curiosity, empathy, compassion, kindness, happiness, all those things that make our life worth living. And that's not to say that the data driven part of our mind isn't important. Of course it is. We have to navigate the world. But this is also where fight or flight happens and survival. Survival brain is wonderful to help alert you to something that's going on, but it's not good for resolution. I mean, technical resolution that is data driven, yes. But, even really, really successful businesses will tell you that the most important thing in their business is their human capital, the people that are there. And of course, all those behaviors that make those interactions positive and help move productivity forward, it's all right brain stuff. So these exercises called PQ exercises, they help you get into your body. And when you're in the present moment, very focused on now, you can't be thinking about past issues or the future. There's no, there's no wisdom in chaos. And when your mind is in chaos, in turmoil, thinking about past transgressions or future catastrophizing about things, that's not helping you. So we have to be in the present moment.
So you're certified
Yes.
coach.
Yes, I'm a
And
certified
so,
coach.
what would you say about it? Positive intelligence coaching to kind of capsulize what it does for you?
So the reason that I became a coach was because a colleague introduced me to it. And as soon as I started doing the work myself, I immediately realized that it was going to be so helpful for my grief clients once they did the grief work. So I typically bundle it together. And clients go through the grief work with me, and then I take them into the positive intelligence work. And the reason I do that is because once they've done the grief work, they can set aside their connection to all that pain in the past. They've let that go. It doesn't mean they've let their wonderful memories go or their love or that they're pretending it didn't happen. No, we get through that in a healthy way. And I've literally seen this happen. It's one of the things I love about Zoom. When people arrive at that place, I can literally see their face light up. Their whole image changes.
Oh,
It's just,
wow.
it's magic to watch. And even their family and coworkers notice and will say things like, "Oh my gosh, you look so much happier. What's happened?" So when this beautiful, light, energetic space opens up, then they are ready for, okay, now what else? What can I do? And that's when I take them into positive intelligence, because then it helps them identify ways that they are still maybe sabotaging themselves. And we all have different degrees of it, but it's just super helpful. And the positive intelligence work actually can have an effect on future grief events, because if you are learning better ways to interact with people, it makes your relationships stronger and you're more apt to be living in the present moment and very aware of what's going on. And that in turn decreases the chance that you are doing things that you, if someone passes, for instance, that you would end up saying, I wish I'd done that differently, or I wish I hadn't said that. Well, if you're doing the positive intelligence work, you likely will not have said things. You have created these healthier relationships.
Mhm.
So I find it's, wonderful for helping people move forward, but also wonderful in helping them create the kind of relationships that they never have to look back on and say, I could have done that better.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Is the only entry into it by having grief?
No, I have done it. And by the way, that is the one thing I do in a group, because it's so helpful for people to share their experiences with these accomplice saboteurs and their judge. It helps them feel, oh my gosh, me too. So they realize that, okay, we're all going through this. No human escapes this at all.
You wrote a piece that you shared with me, and it was about this judge that and
The
you
tyranny
judge
of the
within.
judge.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it was so powerful, and I told you this already, but I immediately saw my own self in it, and so I understand what you're saying with your groups.
Yeah. On my website, I call it mental fitness mastery, but I use the positive intelligence word for it. Mental fitness is just, it's actually more important, I think, than physical fitness. But if you went to the gym, you wouldn't go for 6 weeks and say, okay, I'm fit for life now. No. And it's the same thing with this. Mental fitness is a practice for life. There are things that you can do if you maintain these practices. And we're always more likely to do that if we're in a group, because there's that group encouragement effect. And it's just been proven to be, you adhere to things better, you encourage each other. So, yes, it's better in a group. And I have done, in fact, I have a group right now that is a mix of people who've done grief work and who haven't. So, yes, I do it separately as well. But often what happens is when they start doing the positive intelligence work, they realize, I probably need to do some grief work as well.
We have different kinds of grief too. So that's what made me ask that question, that it may not be specifically, a passing, but it's still a loss.
Yeah, it's a really good point. In fact, I've had clients who have come to me, for instance, for the loss of a child. And I explain to them the first thing that we do is we go back and we do kind of a life review and we look at your losses from the beginning. And they'll say, well, I haven't really had any other losses, because people are so embedded in their minds, a loss means someone's died is the primary, just like you said, just the primary big one. And I model everything. So when I go through mine, they're like, oh my gosh. And it's big stuff. Yes, if you've been sexually abused in any way, or you felt compromised as a child, if you had it not been in a loving environment, if you've been emotionally abused, those are all grief events. And the more we stuff those down and don't acknowledge them, they stick with you forever. And they impact your adult life and renders you incapable of having healthy relationships. It'll show up in alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sex addiction, all of these things, any way to soothe yourself in a way that should have happened by addressing your grief when you were little. So, yes, there are many, many things, even things like the loss of the ability to control of your body. If you've had, a major illness or a major accident, that's absolutely, even for a child having to leave a home that they've lived in for ages or divorce, all of these things count for sure. Bullying at school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you do, but I said at the beginning, you do important work,
Oh, thank you.
healing work.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. Very
Yes,
rewarding.
I bet. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
Just that it's not as scary as it as it seems when you have someone sort of guiding you through it, and you're not alone. You know, we're all from the same stuff. We're all going through some degree of the same things, and there's no need to be ashamed or feel guilt. And I always tell my clients, you can't you can't shock me. I've either done it or I've heard it. So So yeah, I would just say your mental fitness is so important and it has to be a lifelong practice. And beginning with grief work is healthy. And here's one more thing I would say. Y- There are so many people I talk to who want to do the work, but being willing to invest in it is maybe a different thing. And that doesn't just go for this kind of work, but maybe you should be getting some physical therapy, or maybe you should be getting a massage every once in a while, or maybe you should be going to the gym. Lots of times people will just somehow put it aside and spend their money on something else. Make yourself a priority. I promise you that when you do, everything can change in a practical sense, in a spiritual sense, in an emotional sense. So, absolutely invest in yourself. You and your relationships, the constellation of relationships in your life will all benefit for sure.
How do people get a hold of you?
They can reach me if you go to my website at inspiredgriefrecovery.com. If you scroll down, there's a link you can connect with me for a free 30-minute call or send me an email at Marla at inspiredgriefrecovery.com and on Instagram and Facebook under Inspired Grief Recovery.
Wonderful.
I know that people need encouragement and, not everybody's going to agree with the things that I say, and that's okay. That's okay. That's the other thing that I really respect. Everyone's in a different place. I may not be right about things, but this is where I'm at right now. Our beliefs and our orientation changes over time. I don't believe the same things now that I did 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I believe things differently than the previous 10 years. And that's good. That's how we grow. So just if we can all be accepting of where we each are and honor that, I think that's super important.
Here, here.
Yeah. Just don't let that judge of self, circumstances, or others get carried away.
Right. All right. Well, thank you,
You
Marla.
are
This has
so
been
welcome.
terrific.
I hope there's something worthwhile in here.
A lot worthwhile.
Oh, great. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Kate. I appreciate it.
It has been a pleasure. This is Kate again, thanking you for listening to Everyday Creation. Please share this episode as you wish.